Howdy, my name's Zach, and if you met me when we're in the company of a very cool girl, then don't be surprised. She's crazy about me. Would it bother you if I told you that this cute looking student is older than me? Now, I'll tell you about how it turned out that she dotes on me, and you'll understand everything. Stay with me. Watch the story. Write your opinion in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. My parents and I recently moved in with my grandmother, whose name is Hillary. She doesn't like me to call her Granny. She prefers us to call her by her first name. Hillary has been living alone in the big house since grandfather passed away. She got married early, gave birth to my mother when she was only 18 years old. My grandmother used to live like everyone else. She looked like an older woman, loved to eat meat, fed for slaughter whenever came to visit. But then there was a change in her. The fact is that my grandmother was diagnosed with a disease a few years ago. She was associated with poor nutrition, a sedentary lifestyle, and when he died, it was a big blow, especially for her. Hillary loved her husband, and she indulged his whims in every way, especially in the kitchen. The most favorite thing they did was to eat at night. Yes, they loved fast food, which is strange because my grandparents are against such food, but not they. And when she was left alone, grandmother decided to take care of herself. She was only 53 years old at the time. We thought it was temporary that she would go on a diet, and she always talking about it, just for a short time and then go back to work. My mother was sure that at this age, it's difficult to change habits. And then, last year, my parents told me that we were moving in with her because they didn't want her to be alone. Moreover, my grandmother has a big house, and my father found a better place to work in the city. We all agreed. I adored my grandmother, and she spoiled me. We haven't seen each other for a couple of years. Imagine our face when at the airport when we were approached by a girl who looked like an 18-year-old student. She was shouting from far away, "Zach, my boy!" So only she said. And suddenly, a tiny girl runs up on me. In tight pants with a beautiful short hairstyle, she hugged me so hard that I almost choked. "Mom, what happened to you?" My mother asked in surprise. I couldn't even blink in surprise. There was another person standing in front of us, as my grandmother had lost at least 20 kilograms. She was so young, so renewed, so energetic. She moved quickly, as if the second youth had awakened in her. Everyone was surprised when they had heard me call her Grandma. She immediately asked me to say Hillary, and that was all. These changes were good for her. Grandma learned to drive and got behind the wheel of Grandpa's SUV. It suited her very well. When we arrived home, we saw that she had changed everything there. A new renovation in a modern minimalist style only added another youth. Now, Hillary strictly followed the trends, both in clothing and in everyday life. For lunch, we had a diet meal, a minimum of meat, more greens, vegetables, and fruits. My grandmother gave up alcohol and smoking. Yes, she and grandfather had smoked together for many years. I liked looking at her. The only thing she didn't put away were grandfather's photos. They were all over the place. I was happy for her, and my parents complimented her too. She just smiled. A day later, we decided to go for a walk with her. I found out that she walks like this for 2 hours every day, going up the street and running back. By the way, yes, in the house, she made up a mini sport room, equipped with sports equipment to practice without leaving the house. Every day, she would wake up at 6 and start the morning with a glass of water and exercise, and go to breakfast an hour later. It was so unlike her. "Why did you decide to change yourself so much?" I once asked, to which my grandmother replied, "It was only after she lost a loved one that she realized how wrong they were living. I didn't want to change anything at first, but then I listened to myself and said that I wanted to live longer, to see my great grandchildren," she said, laughing and patting me on the shoulder. "We are what we eat," she said. I remembered those words. Hillary found a job at home, she mastered the computer, and now studied remote work, something in the field of online consultations. She taught the elderly, gave advice on nutrition, scheduled physical activities for each individual, and made a good living from it. And when we moved in with her, she had a lot of more fun because now she dragged me everywhere with her. I learned that my grandmother spends a lot of time on her appearance. That is, she works not only from the inside. In a week, she visited beauty salons 1 to 2 times, did all sorts of cosmetic procedures to rejuvenate the skin, and, she really managed it. She gave me a ride to school one day. My classmates saw her and began to whistle loudly, and then they threw questions at me, where I managed to pick up such a beauty. I just laughed and didn't say anything. A couple of days later, my grandmother invited me to dinner at her favorite cafe. We sat and chatted about something, and she suggested that I work with her, too, to learn how to advise and earn money. Then my classmates came up to us. They just sat down next to each other. Jack held out his hand, said his name, and then asked, "I haven't seen you before. Strange. Why?" After all, I know all the beauties in this city. My grandmother smiled and I rolled my eyes. Jack, you're at the wrong address, I said. And Grandma interrupted me. You don't know me, grandson, because I'm 40 years older than you, she said, laughing. Jack choked, made a surprised face, and then looked at me. This is my grandmother, I told him. He immediately jumped out of his seat, apologized 100 times, and then told me that I would see you in class and left. It was quite a funny situation, and I realized once again how proud I was of my grandma. It was then that I decided to help her to learn how to help people become better, younger, and more beautiful. Isn't that cool? What do you think?
Hello, everyone. My name is Jung. I'm an only child in my own right, but every time I go out in public with my mom, they say, "What a beautiful sister you have." The thing is, my mother looks 20 years old. Once it got in my way. My mother's name is Kim, and our age difference is 20 years, so she is now 36. My mom always looked great. For as long as I can remember, she's been wearing makeup in the morning and in the evening. My father admires her beauty every day, and my mother says that it's all about blood. We are Koreans. We age slowly outwardly. And then literally in one day, we are closer to old age. I believed her because I had a clear example before my eyes. My mother and I were about the same height, 160 centimeters, but I was a little plumper, and my mother is slim. I was already used to loud compliments to her every time we went to the stores or to the market for food. At first, I didn't think it was because my mom looked great, but rather that I didn't look great. But then she found out that she was told that in any society. And then I began to take advantage of this. A young mother is a mother who understands. She taught me how to use cosmetics and bought a separate one for me, for young skin. She allowed me to wear her things, shoes, and made me beautiful hairstyles without any problems. I love to record videos and post everything online. My mother never refused to participate in commercials. She had a great sense of humor and sang divinely. We didn't look much alike. I looked more like my father. I only shared my secrets about guys with her. I knew that she would always support and give good advice. Just recently, I met a guy named Lin. He was new in our class. Oh, all my classmates noticed such a handsome boy. And oddly enough, he began to communicate more with me than anyone else. There was no limit to my happiness. We sat together in class, and every day he brought me some fruit for lunch. It's the cutest thing you can think of. Lynn started courting me and returned the favor. I told my mother about our first kiss, and she wished me luck and told me not to lose my head. I knew she was happy for me, even though she was very worried. Lynn and I went on dates 1 to 2 times a week, to the movies, to cafes, or just for a walk. We always had something to talk about. I fell more and more in love with him. Once, he even wrote a song in my honor and sang it when we were sitting in the park at sunset. It was beautiful. Then came my birthday. Lynn and I decided to celebrate with friends at the club. He promised to pick me up in the evening, told me to be ready by 7. All day, my mother and I ran around looking for an outfit for me, and I found the perfect dress and shoes. I couldn't wait to show my favorite guy. "You're just a princess," my mother said as she helped me get ready for the party. She gave me one last hug, and I just had to put the finishing touches on it. The bell rang in the house, and my mother ran to open the door. It was my lover. Beaming with happiness and sequins, I went down the stairs. My mother was just talking to him about something. I kissed her on the cheek, and we went to the club. "You didn't say you had a sister," Lynn said on the way. "I don't have one. It's my mother," I said. His face changed in an instant. It was evident that he was shocked. "Your mom? She looks so young," he said. I reassured him by telling him that he wasn't the first person to say that. The evening was fun and easy, except that Lynn was acting a little strange. Not as usual. "Is everything all right?" I asked him when we parted, but he assured me that everything was fine. All the time that followed, Lynn seemed to be thinking about something. He skipped questions, often got confused in the answers, always thinking about something. I told my mother about it, and she suggested that I invite him to dinner with us. It was a great idea. We made dinner, and Lynn came in time. Dad was on a business trip at the time, so the 3 of us spent the evening together. "This is for you," he said, handing a bunch of flowers to my mom. She was flattered and politely thanked him. "Why are you dressed up like this? We're not going to a restaurant." I told him and laughed. He was embarrassed. This evening, I saw it from the other side, as it is. Strange, unusual. Lynn talked a lot, asked my mother a million questions, and laughed. I suddenly felt that the evening was passing me by. You are familiar with the phrase, third extra? So this is about me. Then, Lynn left without even kissing me. My mood sank at the end. My mother started asking questions about what had happened, because everything was wonderful. Didn't I tell you we didn't have any secrets? So I told her to her face, I think he's got a crush on you. I told her. My mother's eyes almost popped out of her head in surprise, but I still had an unpleasant feeling in my heart. I couldn't stop thinking that I was right. How disgusting is it that your boyfriend falls in love with your mother? Ugh. What should I do now? After half an hour of denial, my mother finally gave up. She said it was a ridiculous situation and she was embarrassed. I didn't mean for this to happen. I'm sorry, she said, but I knew that it wasn't my mother's fault. Lynn called the next day. I had a dry chat with him, and he said he would come to visit me. No, I want to go for a walk, I said curtly. I heard that he was upset, but I didn't care. In the evening, I went out to him on the street, and we went to the park. He asked almost nothing about me, but he asked 1,000 questions about my mother. Then I broke down and exploded. I was filled with jealousy, anger, stupidity of the situation. Can you stop talking about my mom? Aren't you ashamed at all? She is my mother, and you are openly hitting on her, I shouted at him. Lynn strenuously denied it. You thought I was being polite and paying more attention to her. I wanted to make a positive impression, nothing more, he said, but I didn't believe him. I knew too well when he was lying. The problem was that I fell head over heels in love with this guy, but I knew that such a relationship would not go far. Gathering my thoughts, I took a deep breath and said we should break up. Lynn was sad, but I was also hurt. I called a taxi and went home hysterical. My mother calmed me for a long time. She comforted me with gentle strokes on the head. I didn't realize I'd fallen asleep. All of a sudden, I had a dream about my mom getting a divorce from my dad and marrying my ex-boyfriend. Oh no, this is terrible. This can't be happening, I screamed. I woke up screaming, a lump in my throat, my hands shaking. And suddenly, I heard my mother arguing with someone. I crept out into the hall and saw Lynn standing outside the door, and my mother talking to him. He is holding a bouquet of flowers. I moved closer to hear the conversation. I couldn't believe it. He confessed his love for her, you bastard! My mother told him sternly that he was old enough to be a father, that he was not worthy of her daughter, and that he should get out of our lives once and for all. She was so angry, and then she took the flowers from his hands and threw them away. Go away and don't come back, she screamed. What was it like for me? It was awful, disgusting and bad. But despite the situation, my relationship with my mother has not changed. I realized that Lynn was just not the right person for me. What would you do if you were me? Write an answer in the comments and subscribe to this channel. There are still a lot of more interesting stories to come.